Hey, I'm Amanda. This is my final project, analysis project for 404. So I did the passive voice from what I got from my textbook page. Um, it was it was about quilting and the history of quilting, and I found a lot of passive uses in the first paragraph, and I felt that would be the most beneficial, and what I was thinking would work well with what I had in mind. So with a passive voice, I decided to use an advanced level. I choose a European framework of the C2, or the highest level, kind of, because this is more of they have to be advanced in order to understand this, because you have to use module like the verb tenses and stuff like that, um, as well as this is used primarily in a lot of history classes, which is the ESL subject that I thought would be very well in. And so my target students are decided to do like high school students. I thought it'd be kind of cool to like create a scenario in which the students are seniors, so they're 17, 18 years old, and they've been learning English since they were in elementary, like starting from like probably around fourth grade, I guess. But 1 hour every day for during the school week, and then when they got to junior high, we transferred to 2 hours. So they're very well adverse into the English language. They're from Japan. They're now taking multiple classes that are English based, so like history, as well as math, as it says on it. Um, and so the sentences that were illustrated in my text, a quilt is a bed cover made of squares of materials pieced together. That is the very first sentence that I read, and I was like, oh, passive voice right there. And in the next sentence, each square consists of two layers filled with a layer of wood or cotton, cloth, feathers, or down. Again, another passive within two sentences. Within the first two sentences, I had two passive voice, and I thought couldn't get any better. As you scroll down into with the project, the third one that I found that was really good. Often the squares are decorated with fancy stitches and designs. So as you notice in passive voice, um, there is no agent. So there's no like, oh, I was running. That's an active voice because I was doing the action. However, the action is directed towards the object. So for taking a quilt is a bed cover made of squares of materials and pieced together, the action is going towards the bed cover. And so for number 3, the form that I looked at for a passive voice is the verb to be plus past participle. I can see my students, or any students really, having troubles with using intransitive verbs. And with passive voice, you can't use intransitive verbs because these verbs, they are never followed by a direct object. And with a passive voice, you do need a direct object to say what the action was. And so I can see my students, imaginary students, having difficulties not using the intransitive verb, but using the transitive verb instead. Again, this could possibly be their L1 interference. However, I don't really know much about Japanese and their language interference as well. Thinking of it now, I should have looked at and looked back at our book to see if if passive voice had like the language, and see if Japanese is somewhat like English. But that's the thought that just occurred to me. The meaning for passive voice is the use of it's talking about the past, which is why I decided to use history as my point of subject that the ESL students are going to be doing, because with passive voice, they're talking about the past, but they're not using a precise subject. So like as I gave the example, I was running. Was and running, was is a verb to be, and running is the past participle, but that is that's the agent in which I am doing it. However, when using the passive voice, you don't use an agent particularly. You don't use an agent in which the object is directed towards, or like the action is. So this allows for nobody to really take the blame for that sentence. So this could the meaning behind the passive voice will be very confusing for the ESL students. They will be confused of how to use a person or someone. Let's say I have one written down here. Hold on. Oh, I just lost it. Oh, that play was written by Shakespeare. Like, there is an object, and probably what they'd be confused is, well, there's an agent. Like, how is that a passive sentence? And you really need to emphasize that a passive sentence, you really have to, that you can have an agent, the subject, kind of, but you have to really, really emphasize that that agent can't be really a part of the action. That they can't be the action, kind of. So the play was written by Shakespeare, so like the by allows for it to be a passive sentence, because by is like, oh, bye. Yeah, in the book it explains it. And so the use is mostly used in history classes, since the books that are written in history, they use passive voice because they want to display, want to have the focus on the subject of the sentence that receives the action. So the Great Wall was built in whatever year it was. Like they could possibly say who the emperor was as well, which I don't know. I'm not a history major. But the Great Wall was built in, was and built was as the verb to be, and built is. Past participle. And so they add the emperor, like by emperor so and so, like it'd still be a passive voice. But that's how like the textbooks mainly use it. It's very technical, scientific kind of way of writing. That again was why I emphasized the fact that these students need to be advanced, like a C2 level in the European framework, because if they're lower than a C group, they will not be able to understand what is going on. They just won't have the resources or the knowledge of understanding how all this combines together, and whatnot. And so for this, I choose this diagram or this chart to express how they usually say, which is like active voice, because that's what usually what we say is active voice. Like, oh, I went running. I'm going to the store, or no, that's not. But like, that's kind of like, because the students are taught subject, it's like the subject, verb, object, SVO structure, and that's kind of more along the lines of active. So like showing like, hey, this is what you're saying, and this is active, but this is passive. This is what we need to learn, and comparing those two would definitely help the students understand the difference. Having the same sentence. I went running when it was raining, or it was raining by the time I went running. Like having those two sentences together can really benefit the students of seeing the difference. And this is probably for like a different activity, but like to write up the form up on the board is definitely a huge one, as well like the form, like the verb to be plus past participle, and then have examples followed by it with underlining the verb to be and the past participle in the sentence so they can understand that. Another thing you should probably bring up to the students is that the active form, active voice is very much subject oriented, while passive voice is action oriented towards the subject, which would be a good idea to bring up. And so this brings us to our dialogue, number 4. I, however, don't have a partner, and I'm also a tiny bit confused of how to get my peer review, so this is all in one assignment turned in, as you see right now. And so I'm going to play both the student and the teacher. I picked the 7 Wonders of the World because that's something I've always been interested in. Like, never really dug more into it, but I always found that when you combine a theme that the students really love, and for instance, like, especially with us being a history class, kind of, or like having a theme of the history class, this will motivate the students in wanting to learn how to write in a passive voice because they've reached that level, as well as they're learning more about the 7 Wonders. Like, they should, most likely, they probably already know the 7 Wonders, but it'd be cool to like refresh them on it and build up on the grammar with it. It's good to the Krashen rule of the input hypothesis, I plus 1. So like the I is the new information, is the old information, plus 1 is the new. So they already know about the 7 Wonders. So you just add on the grammar, and they would be able to understand. If you add on like 2, they would probably still understand it, but as a review for the 7 Wonders plus the grammar, adding the grammar to it, will just emphasize the grammar a little bit more, since they're not just too focused on learning the new subject of the 7 Wonders of the world. So I'll go ahead and start. So my dialogue. So teacher, today I should also mention before I start, this dialogue would best be suited for the very beginning of the class. Well, because then like the students just sit down and kind of are like, okay, great, good morning, how are you? So we're going to talk about the 7 Wonders of the world today, yay. But we're also going to add a little grammar point so where you can write a historical piece, kind of, which is passive voice. So I'll go ahead and start my dialogue. So teacher, today we're going to learn how to write in a passive voice by using the 7 Wonders of the world. Can someone name them all? So student, the Great Pyramid of Giza, Hanging Gardens of Babylon, Colossus of Rhodes, Lighthouse of Alexandria, Temple of Artson, Statue of Zeus at Olympus, and Mausoleum of Helicarnassus. Sorry if I butchered all of them. So teacher, so parenthesis, this is like a side note to do. As the students are saying these 7 Wonders of the world, you're writing them down and whatnot, making sure there's space underneath. And so then I would go ahead and proceed. Good. Passive voice is used in describing the past, such as history, without using a precise subject or agent. We are more interested in the subject of the sentence and the action that is happening to it. The form of this is, and you write this up on the board, the verb to be plus past participle. I take the Great Pyramid in Giza and use the sentence, the Great Pyramid in Giza was built in 2560 BC. Can you identify the verb to be? The student, the verb to be is was. And I would underline was. And the teacher, yes, what about the past participle? The student, it would be built. Teacher, I would underline. Good. Now come up with a sentence for Hanging Gardens of Babylon. You cannot use when it was built. And then I would just walk around to like kind of like help students as they're doing it. So I'll ask the student